Today's lecture is going to be over Chapter 28, Section 2, the objectives, examine Mongolians and Taiwan's early history and links to China. Number 2, describe the culture of Mongolia and Taiwan. Number 3, examine Mongolia and Taiwan's economy. And number 4, describe daily life and Western influence in Mongolia and Taiwan. So what today's lecture is going to be about is it's going to be about Mongolia and Taiwan. And in this lecture we kind of go back and forth between these two countries over and over. Now if we go ahead and we look at the map, you're going to go ahead and you're going to see Russia on the top here and you're going to see China on the bottom. Mongolia is going to be stuck right in the middle here. So if you go back and you look to the 1900s, or I should say the predominant time during the 1900s, you're going to see that Russia is going to be the Soviet Union and they're going to be communist, and then China will be communist as well. So with Mongolia being stuck in the middle, just their geographic position on the globe, you're going to see that that's why political they're going to go ahead and they're going to be communist. Now another thing to kind of make sure that we understand about is Taiwan, and Taiwan is going to be right next to China. Now what's so important about that is that China and Taiwan's history are kind of linked together when the nationalists flee China. So again, you're going to go ahead and you're going to see these two countries are going to be kind of connected. So keep that in mind when we start talking about kind of the history of the nomads and the traders, and we start talking about Mongolia and Taiwan. But Mongolians empire. Mongolians are nomadic herders until Genghis Khan conquers Central Asia. Genghis Khan is going to die in 1227, and the successor is going to expand the empire. This is not very common. What we usually see is that when a country has a ruler, a very good, very strong ruler, a lot of times they're going to go ahead and they are going to be either killed or defeated, and then when that happens, a lot of times the country kind of separates or breaks apart. Now Genghis Khan is definitely, we can't consider him to be a good guy, but he is a great leader, and what he does do is that he unites the huge empire, and then it continues on even after his death. The empire does break up in the 1300s, and China is going to gain control of Mongolia in the 1600s. Mongolia achieves independence in 1911, and so what we see after that is Mongolia becomes communist, because again, this is kind of what we start seeing in the East Asian countries. You see China, you see the Soviet Union, and they come and they kind of pick it up and are also communists as well. But what we also see is that the communism, when it starts to kind of fall in Russia, and I should say the Soviet Union in 1989, if you remember the domino effect when countries start leaving the Soviet Union and they can't stop it, what we see is that Mongolia is going to do kind of the same thing, and in 1989 they start to kind of go away from communism and they start going more towards democracy. Now, Taiwan then is going to be linked to China in kind of an interesting way. The prehistoric people migrate to Taiwan from China. And again, if you kind of look at this map right here, you're going to see that there's a very, very narrow area right there, and that's where China can go ahead and they can go into Taiwan. The Malays and the Polynesians are going to settle on the island, and you're going to see the Han Dynasty in China are going to arrive in the 500s. The Manchu Dynasty, we've talked about them before, they're going to conquer Taiwan in 1683. Now, if you guys kind of remember that Japan during the late 1800s, early 1900s, they're going after China. They get so much that they start to invade China in the 1900s, and Taiwan is going to be one of those areas where they kind of step in. Now the Chinese nationalists are going to lose to the communists in 1949. If you guys kind of remember the story, the Chinese communists are going to come in and they're going to expel the Chinese nationalists, and these nationalists are going to go ahead and they're going to flee to this area of Taiwan. But the interesting thing is that when they go there, they're going to establish a Republic of China, and they're going to say we're going to become our own country. But China does not recognize them, and what that means is that China is actually going to go and they're going to say that they are not a country, that they are actually still part of China. Now, the United States has to be really, really careful here, because the United States wants to continue to trade with Taiwan and wants to continue to kind of trade in that area right there of Japan, Taiwan, and other areas, but they also don't want to anger China. So they kind of have to play a balancing act of trading with Taiwan, but not angering them and considering them to be a country. So kind of a delicate situation right there. Now, Mongolia is going to be kind of an interesting country as well, because they do not have a superiority complex over China, and they don't want China to have a superiority complex over them. I equate this to a country that is in Central America, places like Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador. If you were to call those people Mexican, they would get rather upset because they're not from Mexico. They are from Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador. Completely different country, similar culture, but not the exact same. Well, this is what we see here in Mongolia, is that Mongolians are going to say, yes, we are close, we are kind of similar to Chinese people, we've got some of the culture, but we are our own country. As it says right there, Mongolia has ruled, but also been ruled by China throughout their history. Mid-1300s, China is going to rise up and drive out the Mongolian rulers. You're going to see the Great Wall of China being built during this period of time. In the 1600s, China under the Manchus are going to conquer Mongolia, and they're going to rule for a long time. During this time, Mongolians are going to adopt many aspects of the Chinese culture, and that's what's going to lead to kind of the confusion of, are they Chinese or are they Mongolian? They are Mongolian. July's festivals of the 3 games of men in a dam is about 2,300 years old. What they do here is they do wrestling, archery, horseback racing, all rooted in ancient ways, and it's a reflection of their culture. Now, Taiwan, going back to them, this is going to be a population and culture that's almost exclusively Chinese. They're going to have a capital city in Taipei, which is going to have Buddhist temples. You're going to see Chinese art museums. People are very well educated in Taiwan. Many universities, they have 30 daily newspapers, and what that's going to show is that that's going to show that people do a lot of reading. Most people are going to speak an official language of Northern Chinese, which is Mandarin. Kind of interesting is that Mandarin is actually the language that the most people in the world actually use, but the most widely spoken language is English. Now, where's the confusion? The confusion is that Mandarin is talked or used by people in East Asia. So you have places like Japan, China, Mongolia, Taiwan. These people all speak Mandarin, and again, they just have far more people than the rest of the world. So just sheer numbers, it's Mandarin, but Mandarin is very much located in East Asia, South Asia, places like that. Then English, of course, is spoken throughout the entire world. People contribute a number of religious, ethical beliefs. 9% of the practice blend of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, which then is again going to be kind of linked to their culture as we kind of connect people. Economic prospects for Mongolia. Many people live kind of a rural area lifestyle. They're going to be herders. They're going to manage livestock, things like sheep, goats, camels, horses, cattle. Nomadic herding was an economic base for centuries. What's nomadic herding? You don't live in one specific area. You're going to go ahead and you're going to walk, you're going to wander with your basically your livestock. Cashmere industry uses soft wool of local goats. Developing industries while making difficult shift to market economy. The Soviet Unions are going to have a huge impact on Mongolia. What they do is that they guide their economy for 70 years. The state owns the factories, and they basically don't care about anything else. So when communism rolls into Mongolia, they basically are going to do whatever they can to make money, and a lot of things are kind of left to survive on their own. Large deposits of coal, petroleum, copper, gold, and iron are found here, which does make it so that Mongolia can go ahead and trade. Now, Taiwan is going to have a little bit different economic success story. What we see is that they've got few resources, so they don't have the resources like Mongolia and China does. But they train their workers, they motivate their workers very hard, and they're very prosperous. This prosperity is going to be based on manufacturing industries, and if I could underline anything right here, I would underline this word: trade. They have got very, very aggressive trades. So what we see is that Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea are considered to be economic tigers. These are nations with cheap labor, high technology, and aggressive exports. They want to get things in there. They're paying people low. They've got high technology. They're going to mass produce as much as they can, as fast as they can, and they're aggressively going to export things to the rest of the world. Now, in the Pacific Rim, it's an economic and social region surrounding the Pacific Ocean, and what we see is that in East and Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Chile, and off the United States coast, this Pacific Rim, a lot of people are going to be pushing for these economic tigers to be trained as much as they can. And so what we see is that it's a huge, huge, huge push for modernization. Now, Now, what we see in Mongolia is that it's a little bit different. It's a little bit slowed down. Nomads once guided animals from grassland to grassland. You're going to go ahead and see long, cold winters, short, hot summers. It's very hard on the livestock. So these nomads are going to live in tents called yurts. They're going to be made of felt and leather. And what you see is that these yurts are going to go ahead and they're going to be found in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar, which is basically kind of showing that the capital city has got these tents. And you think about Washington, D.C. having a bunch of people in tents sitting around there, that's probably not going to happen. But again, in this area of Mongolia, you are going to see these tents be around. So it just kind of shows the culture that they're a little bit less modernized, a little bit more back to their culture of kind of historical. Many are going to still raise sheep, cattle, goats. Some still are nomadic in Mongolia, but most live on farms and ranches with small villages in the center. So what we see is that Mongolia is going to be a little bit more traditional, whereas Taiwan is going to be a little bit more modern. Now, Western influences on Taiwan. This is just kind of an interesting kind of pickup of the culture here. But Taiwan, baseball is very important. Now, where does baseball kind of originate from? Baseball, in its kind of truest sense, is going to be originated in the United States. So if Taiwan likes baseball, they've obviously had Western culture kind of adopted or kind of pushed onto them. You're also going to see that other parts of Asia, like Japan, you're also going to see baseball being very important. But kind of an interesting side note here, in the Little League Baseball becomes very, very popular in Taiwan. 1974, the United States bans foreign teams from the Little League World Series. Now, part of the ban is realistic. What they saw is that a lot of people were not playing the age that they were supposed to be. They were too old. But part of the ban is the fact that Taiwan is so dominant in the early 70s. And so what we see is that back in 1976, Taiwan's going to actually be kind of brought back into the Little League World Series. But this does show that Taiwan has very much been influenced by Western culture. So, United States kind of works with both of these countries, a little bit more with Taiwan, but Mongolia a little bit more traditional, Taiwan a little bit more kind of current and up to date. That concludes chapter 28, section 2. Please make sure that you, after you've completed this lecture, make sure that you complete your assessments.